very good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 180th episode of the Together for Education webinars brought to you by Notebook. Just over 2 years ago, when the pandemic had just set in and schools had closed down, we here at Notebook felt that it was our duty to set up a platform for educators to connect meaningfully on discussing problems we're facing with the rising need of digital education and online learning and arrive at common solutions. Today, 180 episodes later, this platform has grown much bigger than we could have ever anticipated. All thanks to your love and support. We have discussed extremely curricular topics here like digital learning, NEP and assessments, extracurricular topics like sports and theatre, topics like school finance and management, and even evolved topics like mental health. Today, we have a very interesting and relevant topic: learning through experiments. Learning is indeed a wholesome experience, and that's why we often hear about life lessons, the lessons that we gather while experiencing the beautiful journey called life. Now, coming to a child's education, it is the classroom experiments which can be appropriately used to introduce new ideas or clarifying puzzling aspects of topics. Studies show that learning is definitely more effective with practical experiments. However, gone are those days when experiments were confined to the chemistry labs, with school education soaring to newer heights with the global standards of learning and technology. Experiments in learning has indeed become the new buzzword. Our first speaker on this topic today is Mr. Philip Burrett. Mr. Burrett retired as the Deputy Headmaster from the illustrious Doon School in Dehradun after 44 years of serving in education across various institutions. Mr. Burrett served the Doon School as housemaster, head of department, dean of activities, dean of student welfare, deputy headmaster, second master, and acting headmaster. With great distinction, he also carried out a visioning exercise for the Doon School in the year 2011 through an in-depth study of a number of British public schools and various schools in the US. Mr. Burrett qualified as a leadership trainer at Wellington College, UK in the year 2000. He is also an athlete, an adventurer, and a naturalist. And we at Notebook are privileged to have Mr. Burrett as our senior advisor. Sir, a very good evening and over to you.
Thank you very much, Gagori, for that introduction. I hope I'm audible.
Absolutely, sir.
Yeah. And a very good evening to Achin, Abhishek, Meghna, our respected panelists and guests. As teachers, we have this age-old saying, tell me and I'll forget, and show me and I may remember, but let me do it and it will stay with me forever. As little children, we've always been thrilled with doing and experimenting rather than being told what to do and lectured to. And so much of our life, our love for science came because we were allowed to experiment with boiling points and expansion of metals, laws of moments, finding optic lengths and analyzing salts. Even in maths, we love measuring and weighing rather than listening to the teacher at the blackboard. In geography, I loved land surveying and collecting, rock samples. I think kids are hardwired to experimentation. I had a history teacher friend of mine who made his history classes very exciting by taking his children to a rubbish heap and making them dig like an archaeological experiment. And they dug into the soil and picked up matchboxes and plastic. And he imagined what people who came 100 years after us, if they dug into this pit, what would they know or infer about the humans who left all this? If you watch little children at play, everything is experimentation. They're climbing up trees, for example. Swinging on a swing was our introduction to pendulums. Splashing in pools taught us buoyancy. Skipping stones on lakes taught us about critical angles. And when we threw balls at walls, we learned about the laws of reflection. It's all experiment from which we infer and observe. After all, we don't learn how to cycle or drive by sitting in a classroom looking at the blackboard. We do this by actually doing the activity, swimming as well. Our forefathers experimented much before they collated their findings into data by the sowing and harvesting seasons, the movements and the phases of the moon, what to eat, what was toxic, what need not be eaten. by a process of trial and error, which is actually experimentation. We need to learn to be wrong in order to know what is right. Sometimes our modern education system is so based on correct answers, so based on not making mistakes to pass exams. Much of our education, because it is convenient, is teachers talking and children listening, so that they regurgitate these cram facts on paper and pass exam. So as I said earlier, right answers are not the only way to learn. Sometimes one learns by wrong answers. Everyone deserves an access to education. It's important that we are given the opportunity to learn differently, because we're all individuals. Models of learning have often favored those with good memories, but learning is much more than succeeding in an exam. So what is what is experimental learning? It is an idea that experiences are generated through our ongoing interactions and engagement with the world around us. And learning is an inevitable outcome of experience. This theory of learning is different from cognitive and behavioral learning theories, as it takes a more holistic approach. It considers the role that all our experiences play in our learning, including our emotions, cognition, and environmental factors. The experimental learning theory advocates for deep learning rather than surface learning. Surface learning or shallow learning normally involves studying for an exam, which might be achieved through memorizing information in a textbook, and information may not be retained well in the end. Deeper learning, however, normally involves learning about something using a number of different methods, from reading and experimenting to role playing and discussing. These methods help students to truly understand what they're learning by having them apply and discussing theories rather than just memorizing them. They discuss how learning from experience involves a process of resolving conflict between contradictory ideas, known as cognitive conflict and cognitive dissonance. This demonstrates that experimental learning may cause students to change old habits, question old ideas, and explore new ways of thinking. Experimental learning is the process of learning by doing, eventually, by engaging students on hands-on experience and reflection. They are better able to connect theories and knowledge learned in the classroom to real-life situations. Now, when you talk about experimental learning, you cannot escape the name of David Clough, who was an American educationist, theorist, whose name has been totally linked up with experimental learning. He came out with his theories in 1984. And he says that there are two goals of experimental learning. One is to learn the specifics of a particular subject, and the other is to learn about one's own learning process. So experimental learning describes the ideal process of learning. It invites one to understand oneself as a learner and empowers one to take charge of one's own learning and development. Now, David Clough suggested that the learning cycle is a four-step cycle. It begins with concrete experience. The cycle begins with the learner having a concrete experience. This means either learning something brand new or experiencing something familiar in a new way. Learning to ride a cycle, for example, or playing a musical instrument. The second stage is reflective observation, where you reflect on what you have experienced after having a concrete experience. The learner should spend some time thinking about what happened, or watching others doing the same thing and reflecting on what's occurring. Just asking oneself, what went well? What am I struggling with? What can I do differently? These are the things that are going to come under reflective observation. The third is abstract conceptualization. After reflecting on the concrete experience, it's time to make sense of their experience and reflection. They may think about their next steps for improving, come up with a plan of action, or confide in literature or an expert who can offer insights. This allows them, students, to form new ideas and to modify existing ideas. And lastly, active experimentation. The final stage of Klopp cycle is about acting on one's previous reflections and thought. And this is known as active experimentation. The learner applies what they have learned from the initial experience and sees if there are any modifications when they try the experience for a second time. This is essential as opportunity is given to test new ideas. As a result of active experimentation, the learner will have a new concrete experience and the cycle will start all over again. This cycle can keep going until the learner feels confident about the idea at hand and they're happy with how the concrete experience pans out. Now, each person, each learner is so different that he navigates the learning cycle in slightly different ways from other people. Things like, our personalities, our education levels, our background, our careers, our culture can affect the way we learn. So Klopp and his learning style inventory suggests that there are 9 different ways in which you can navigate the learning cycle. These are, we have our own default positions, but it's interesting to know the 9 types, which I'm not going to take you through. But these are experiencing, imagining, reflecting, analyzing, thinking, deciding, acting, initiating, and balancing. These are the 9 ways in which people navigate the cycle of 4. What is the benefit of experimental learning? I think there is more room for creativity. One learns from mistakes, as I said earlier. It encourages more reflection and introspection. It's easier to grasp difficult or abstract concepts using this method. And it prepares students for future experiences in their adult life. Teachers observed improved attitudes towards learning in children. For example, take a teacher in a classroom. A teacher teaches a lesson, which is an experience. The second is you reflect on this experience. What went right in this class? What didn't go right? What can I change for next time? Third, we critically analyze the experience. We identify what it was that made this lesson good or bad. Was it the activity? Was it the instructions? Was it the time of day? And the last is we plan our future actions based on what we have learned. Once we decide what the problem is, what went wrong, what went well, we can brush the plan up for the next time we teach this lesson. Now, experimental learning can be applied not only to the classroom, it's applied to sports coaching, it can be applied to workplace training, it can be applied to research field trips, it can be applied to learning new skills, like learning a new instrument or cycling, and it can also be applied to internships. Finally, no matter who one is, we can be teachers, students, or something completely different. Experiential learning or experimental learning can be extremely valuable as it encourages the idea of learning as a lifelong process. And, we don't have to stick to traditional learning methods in order to develop. Experimental learning opportunities exist in a variety of course and non-course based forms and may include things like community service, research, studying abroad, student-teacher teaching. And at the end of the day, I think using experimental learning, students get a better understanding of the course material. They get a broader worldview. They learn their skills, interests, and passion, and also values. They have insights into their own skills, interests, passions, values. They have the opportunity of collaborating with diverse groups of people. They have a positive professional practices and skill sets developed. They have the gratification of assisting community needs. And of course, it develops self-confidence and leadership skills. So at the end of the day, if you look at the Indian curriculum, the IC and ICSE and CBSE, you see so many schools have now shifted to the international curriculum because there's much more experimental learning worked into the way those courses are taught. And I think we too, through our new education policy, are going to see far more experimental learning as a form of teaching our syllabus. Thank you very much for listening. I'm very grateful for your patience, and I look forward to listening to both Achin and the expert panel. Thank you very much. Over to you, Gagori.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for that wonderful introduction to this topic. As you mentioned, learning truly is an inevitable outcome of all the experiments. Well, ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker on this topic is Mr. Achin Bhattacharyya. Achin is the founder and CEO at Notebook. A chartered accountant by training, he was a director at Deloitte prior to starting Notebook. He has worked in India and abroad in various senior capacities in GE, PwC, KPMG, and Deloitte. Achin is a member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of England and Wales, a fellow of the ICAI, a member of CP Australia and CP Ireland, a member of CIMA UK. He is also the recipient of the prestigious Indian Achievers Award. An avid reader and a passionate traveler, Achin has keen interests in economics, history, literature, and philosophy. He's a regular speaker at various forums and chambers of commerce and also contributes articles to numerous publications regularly. He is also on the board of some of the most renowned corporates and contributes significantly to their brand strategies. Achin, over to you.
Good evening, everyone. Gaguri, am I audible?
Absolutely.
I once again welcome all of you to today's session. A very interesting and contemporary topic. Now, what is a better way to teach children about animals? To show them pictures from a book, or maybe take them to zoo on a Sunday? Or what is a better way to learn cooking? Is it going through some good literature on this topic, or to actually enter the kitchen? So there's no doubt about it that when we discuss this particular topic and we can try to connect it to our own real life experiences about anything, be it learning to drive a car or learning to help ourselves in the kitchen, or maybe trying to grasp some good understanding about our field of interest. For example, an internship assignment in a particular field of our choice, maybe 6 months or 1 year, is invaluable. Something which perhaps no textbook can teach us. In this particular regard, I think Burrett sir gave us a wonderful overview, and I'm sure, considering the fact that we have very eminent senior educators with us here today, who will share their own wealth of experience on this particular topic, how NEP, of course, is a game changer, a very welcome move on this particular topic, and their own experiences. So I'll slightly step back and take a more holistic view of the topic and share a few small incidents. And then we see how we can connect the dots. I was reading about this very important study which is conducted by psychologists, and how they've discovered the various mental processes that are involved in learning. Now, few of these classical studies, they not only demonstrate a profound truth about how we learn, but often at the same time showing up our unjustified assumptions about how our mind works. So I'm sure many educators in this forum are familiar with the name Frederick Bartlett, who was a Cambridge psychologist, who very beautifully, to prove his point, used a Native American folk story called Word of the Ghosts to show something very fundamental about our memories. And this is indeed very interesting. So the story is a very simple, basic story, a tale of two young men who go on a hunting expedition, and things don't work out as planned. So one of them becoming involved in a raid and coming into contact with some ghosts. Now the tale has some familiar elements. Like when I say familiar, I mean from the perspective of a Western audience about hunting. They go in a canoe. At one point, they hide behind a log. That sort of thing. But it also has some aspects which are, frankly speaking, little unusual in the Western culture. It discusses about a mortal wound that doesn't hurt. It discusses about men dying after something black coming out of their mouth. It discusses about ghosts. Now, what is interesting is not the story, but the study involved. Now, the author made people read this story, and then he tested their recall over intervals varying between 15 minutes and up to 10 years. He asked them simple questions to understand whether they're being able to recall the story. Of course, one natural finding was that the longer the delay, the less accurate people were. And that, I think, is a no-brainer. But the most important result concerned the nature of people's inaccuracies. Bartlett saw how the memory errors people made tended to focus around the unfamiliar elements. Now, people's recall was better for things that they had a good experience of or model of. For example, be it the hunting expedition, but for things which were a little unfamiliar to them, chances are more that these elements got dropped or distorted in their memories so as to fit with a reasonable expectation. Like, for instance, the canoes became boats, for example, or the mortal wound was immediately recognized as fatal. Now, these studies show that memory is a constructive process, not something like a video recorder, but a web of associations from which accurate memories and plausible false memories are rebuilt as they are needed. So the moral of the learning is that you can't just slot new memories. You just can't slot new memories in like writing files to a computer disk. You need to integrate them into what you already know, making corrections between old and new information if you're going to successfully recall them. The second very interesting study is about, again, a very familiar name, B.F. Skinner, who is known as the father of behaviorism. Now, his school of psychology, and this was a wonderful experiment that he conducted by training and taking note of the behavior of pigeons and rats. And to this date, the rat cage with the liver and food pellet is called Skinner box globally, all over the world. Goes on to show his profound impact. Now, his great achievement was to show how schedules of reinforcement, such as delivery of food pellets to hungry rats, could condition their behavior. Now, out of Skinner's key claims that he post his studies he came up with, was that the right practice conditions, meaning that correct behavior is appropriately rewarded, any task can be learned using simple associations. This means anything that can form simple associations, even a pigeon, can learn many complex tasks. In 1995, a team, and this was again a very well publicized, a lot of articles around this particular topic in 1995, a team that claimed that they taught pigeons to discriminate between Picasso and Monet paintings were intellectual descendants of Skinner. So like him, they believe that we underestimate the power of practice and reward in shaping behavior. So after just a few weeks of training, not a very elaborate or long training as well, their pigeons could clearly differentiate between these paintings by pecking on designated buttons. Now, for a behaviorist, the moral is that even complex learning is supported by fundamental principles of association practice and reward. It also shows that you can actually train, and you can train someone by following an established pattern, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they know a lot about that particular subject. For instance, in this particular case, it's not that the pigeons know a lot about art, but they're being able to distinguish the painting. The third, again, a very interesting piece is about dissociable memory systems. So we say it's like riding a bike, precisely because this kind of memory seems different from the kind of things we easily forget, like names, for instance. Sometimes unfamiliar names we very easily forget. Now, what is now indisputable is that different memories are supported by different anatomical areas of the brain. Now, again, a study showed that amnesic patients who had trouble remembering episodes of their life had no trouble performing a new skill they had learned. Now, this was amazing. Patients who are suffering from amnesia, not being able to recollect or remember certain episodes of their life, but very easily picking up new skills and skills which are repetitive. Now, brain imaging has confirmed that basic division of labor between so-called declarative memory, which is like explicit memory, facts and events, and procedural memory, which is the implicit memory, like habits and skill. So there's a basic division. So the neuroscience allows us to understand the frustrating fact that you have the insight into what you are learning without yet having acquired the skill, or you can have the skill without the insight. But the fact is that in any complex task, you need both. You need insight as well as you need the skill. The other very interesting study was about chess masters. So this was a study that was conducted by analyzing the behavioral trend or pattern of grandmasters in chess. And this study, in fact, was conducted by a Dutch chess master, and again, a renowned psychologist as well, Adrian de Groot. And the findings of the study is very interesting. But it shows what? That chess masters, they could instantly recognize the pattern in the chessboard just by taking a glance at it. Later point of time when they were asked that how was the chessboard, how was it arranged for you, they could exactly replicate it. All they took was a nanosecond just to look at it. However, the interesting part of the study was that they could only recognize those patterns which were not random, patterns which are legal, patterns which are normal, like the way we play chess. The moment, as an experiment, the board was randomly placed and they were asked to take a look, their memory recall was no better than any other novice who is not used to playing chess. The study also goes on to prove that although they were very good in terms of recognizing patterns on the chessboard, they are no better than others when it came to recalling any other event apart from the patterns on the chessboard. So this was with regard to chess masters. Now, last but not the least, there is this famous saying about 10,000 hours of deliberate practice by Erickson. Andreas Erickson is famous for claiming, and there are a lot of literature around this, and he has claimed very actively that world-class performers, what they have in common in different fields, irrespective of your chosen profession or your field of expertise, what is common is that they invest at least 10,000 hours of deliberate practice. Now, deliberate practice is much fun, but whether the domain is, whether it is skating or chess, the thing that distinguishes the best from the runners-up was the way they arranged their lives to prioritize practice. So now all this, if you look at all these incidents, they go on to prove something which is very important. The fact that how important our own experiences and how human brain very easily recognizes a patterns and behaves accordingly. And some of these are really amazing. Richard Riley once said that we need to prepare students for jobs that don't yet exist, to use technologies that haven't been invented in order to solve problems which we don't know yet. Now, in order to live up to these changes, education needs to focus more on learning, which is experimental, expeditional, and experiential, than just being limited to traditional methods of knowledge gathering or knowledge transmission for that matter. So whenever we use this term exponential learning, we all agree that it focuses more on practical application of knowledge and skills, as well as to real world experiences, and to further increase not only learners' knowledge, but also to develop competence in skills and behavior. And although we are discussing this in the context of context of schools, even whether it be higher education, it be therapy, it be corporate training, I think application is all encompassed. There's no doubt about it. Even personal development. Now, UNESCO, I was going through a definition where UNESCO has a unique take on experiential learning. It defines experiential learning as a process that develops knowledge, skill, and attitude. Now, I really like the last part of it. Attitudes based on consciously thinking about an experience. I think very beautifully summed up. Does it involve direct and active personal experience combined with reflection and feedback? Now, it's like a methodology of teaching learning, which has evolved. And even if you look at ancient times, for example, Aristotle wrote that for the things we have to learn, before we can do them, we learn by doing them. Education reformer John Dewey, who is regarded as modern father of experiential education, is often seen as one of the proponents of learning by doing rather than learning by passively receiving. So I think this is common, this is everywhere. He suggested that one's present experiences are a direct result of how their previous experiences interrupt and influence the present situation. I think one thing that I wanted to share, and this is really beautiful. I was reading about clinical psychologist Jean Piaget, known for his pioneering work in child development, who believed, and this belief, I think it says it all, believed that principal goal of education in school should be creating men and women who are capable of doing new things, not simply repeating what other generations have done, but people who are creative, inventive, and discoverers, who can be critical and verify and not accept everything they're offered. He also quoted, and this last bit is really insightful. He also quoted, intelligence is what you use when you don't know what to do. That's when intelligence actually comes into use. So of course, when we discuss this term, wide range of design models comes in, be it experiential learning through laboratories, workshops, studio, apprenticeship, problem-based learning, case-based learning, case study-based learning, which is becoming so popular, project-based learning, inquiry-based learning, be it community-based learning, again, a very cooperative way of learning. And accordingly, design principles, be it in terms of active experimentation, concrete experience, reflective observation, the last part that UNESCO also referred to, and abstract conceptualization. So I think these are some thoughts that I wanted to share. We have a wonderful panel here today. I thank all of you for giving me a very patient hearing. And I sincerely look forward to hear from our distinguished panel, their view on this important topic. Over to you, Gauri. Yeah, Gauri, are you there? I think some small tech glitch. I'm sure Gauri is connecting.
Hello? I'm so sorry. That was
Yeah, Gauri, you're audible. Please go
I'm so
ahead.
sorry. I'm so sorry. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Achin, for those wonderful deliberations. That was truly enriching. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as Achin mentioned, we do have a wonderful panel lined up for you. But before we start with the panel discussion, a bit about us here at Notebook. We at Notebook are an edtech platform that creates short videos pertaining to school curriculum. This means that every topic from every subject of the school syllabus has been converted into a series of short videos that can be used in two different cases. One, when you as a teacher are starting out a topic in your classroom, you can play one of these videos as a method of visually introducing the topic to your students. These videos are just 6 to 10 minutes in duration and take up very little of your class time while offering the right kind of material to the students to generate curiosity and excitement. The second is when the student is studying at home months later, they have access to the same videos on their personal devices, be it a laptop or a smartphone. They can watch the videos over and over again until they get a very clear understanding of the topic that you had taught. What I'm going to do now is play you some short snippets of notebook videos so that you can know what they exactly look like.
Let us perform an activity to understand it better. Burn 2 candles and fix them on 2 plates. Cover one of them with a glass tumbler. Did it get extinguished if we do so? And the uncovered candle keeps on burning. This proves that air or oxygen is necessary for combustion.
Anywhere and everywhere we look around us is filled with wastes. Streets, roads, lakes, ponds, all strewn with wastes, making them extremely polluted and unfit for animals to live in. Moreover, we use many products that comes packaged in aerosol spray bottles. These are a major cause of depletion of the ozone layer. The ozone layer acts as a blanket that protects us from receiving the harmful ultraviolet rays of the sun.
Ever heard someone say that they are suffering from acidity? Yes, that refers to a condition where there is an excessive acid production in the stomach, causing heartburn. Moreover, our blood is slightly basic. Our bodily proteins, as you know, are made up of amino acids. Even the letters in our genetic code, namely A, T, G, and Cs, are nothing but the nucleic bases.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, those were some short snippets from notebook videos, as you just now saw. Today, we have connected with over 2,000 schools and have had more than 26 lakh students benefit from our videos. If you head over to our website www.notebook.school or use our mobile apps for Android and iOS, you would find more than 10,000 such videos at your disposal. With that, it is now time to introduce the wonderful panelists that we have with us here today. We have with us Ms. Kasturi Chatterjee, Principal of Gitanjali Devashray, Hyderabad. Ma'am is a passionate educator, people's person, and a magnetic leader who wants to work hand in hand with the community. A master trainer for CBSE, question paper moderator for various universities, e-learning concept developer, proofreader for various publications. Ma'am is truly dynamic. She has also co-authored books on leadership. She's an avid reader, a movie buff, and also a hardcore foodie. Ma'am, my warmest welcome to you. Welcome to the panel.
Thank you so much.
We also have with us Dr. Parimala Srinivasan. Dr. Srinivasan has done her doctorate in English literature with specialization in Indian writing and English poetry from Osmania University, Hyderabad. She has been an English teacher for over 3 decades and edu leader for 2 decades. She has been the chairperson of the Sahodaya Group for 6 consecutive years and has headed various committees of the CBSE. After heading Central India Academy, one of the best institutions of Devas, for 19 years, she is currently academic director of Faith Foundation Global School Devas and an academic advisor to a number of schools in Devas. An excellent orator, she has been conducting workshops for teachers on classroom management, how to be an effective teacher, 3 C's, time management, value education, evaluation, and ELT. She has traveled extensively and has also penned many articles and poems. She has also won the Sandipani Award for Best Principal, Vidyarthi Vikas Parishad Award for Best Principal, and Women's Achiever Award by Devas Nagar Nigam, only to name a few. She has been recently awarded the Global Principal Award by the CED Foundation. Ma'am, thank you so much for being here today. Unfortunately, Simi Gill ma'am could not join us today due to some unfortunate personal exigency. I shall switch on my camera now and ask the panelists to unmute themselves so that we can start the discussion. Welcome to the panel, ma'am, and a very good evening.
Thank you, and good evening to all.
My first question is to Kasturi Chatterjee, ma'am. Ma'am, do you think experiments in learning are specific to one particular subject, or it can be a very generic approach?
Thank you so much. Thank you, dignitaries. I, as an educator, as we all know that experimental learning, is synonymous to practical on-site learning. But definitely, though the outcome is, generic, but the approach is specific. Now, let me just throw some light on it. Suppose I want to teach my students about some chemicals in chemistry, in my chemistry class. So definitely they have to go to the chemistry lab and they have to work with various chemicals to understand how it works. But suppose I ask them that, how to, about economics. Suppose I'm taking an economics class, that venture into the market and try to understand the behavior of maybe the buyer and the seller, the trader and the consumer behavior. Can they do it inside a lab or the classroom? No, it's not possible. Suppose in a political science class, they want to have a first-hand knowledge about how polling booth, the behavior of people in the polling booth. Can it be done within the classroom environment? No. So for that, I have to take them out into the real polling booth first-hand knowledge. So they need to have that hands-on knowledge. Though out of this, I'm talking about three different subjects which are being addressed in three different ways. But the outcome is same. What is the outcome? They become creatively, adaptable. They think critically. They go collaboratively and they communicate with the people over there. They become media literate. Technologically, they become aware. They grow social skills by interacting with people. Going into the real life situation, they understand how to solve a problem. And definitely to do all this, they need leadership skills. So experimental learning, in a way, enhances all the 21st century skills in a student. And I feel that being an educator, it is the in thing now. So though we are looking for a generic outcome, but we have to, deal with each subject, each category specifically. Thank you so much.
Wonderful, ma'am. Thank you. So I'll come with the same question to Srinivasan, ma'am. Ma'am, what is your idea of this particular question, that how to approach learning with experiments? It should be
good evening to everyone.
Good evening, ma'am.
I think before I even say whether experimental learning is generic or specific, I think I would like to first of all understand the two words. What is experiment? What is an experiment? And what does the word generic mean? When you look at the definition or the meaning of experiment, there are two different meanings. One is a test or a trial, and the second one is trying out a new procedure or a new activity or a new idea. If we go by the first definition, that is a test or a trial, it is specifically related to science subjects and usually carried out in a laboratory, like Mr. Chatterjee put it, science subjects. But if you go by the second definition, that trying out a new idea or a new activity, then I think it refers to any subject, any subject under the sun can be made, more interesting, and can be, different methods, different procedures, different activities can be tried out in various subjects. Therefore, in today's, and when you look at the word, I said generic, the word generic, what does it mean? It means something that is not attached or not related to anything that's particular. So today, if you look at if you look at experimental learning, in today's context, perhaps it is more generic than specific. And experiments can be done both in the classroom, in the laboratory, and even outside. And it is a much needed activity today, especially when you look at the multiple intelligences, which all of us are talking of and which we are catering to when we are talking about making learning more meaningful. So such kind of experiments which are carried out cater to the various intelligences which are part of the multiple intelligences theory. And lastly, the new education policy is also focusing on experimental learning. So I think that all in all, though I would support Ms. Chatterjee on various ways in which this particular experimental thing works in various subjects, still I would go by my assumption that experimental learning is more generic today.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. We will come to the next question to Kasturi ma'am once again. Ma'am, how do schools promote experimental learning?
As it has already been referred in the in the beginning of the discussion about David Call. Now he has a specific two-line axis theory, where the east-west axis, it helps a student to approach a task. We call it processing continuum, that axis. And the north-south axis, we call it as perception continuum, which speaks about the emotional outcome after taking that approaching to that task. So over here, school has to give that freedom to children to take up a task and not to fear whether the child will be able to, take it up successfully and perform and complete it successfully. Because I'm sorry to say, being a teacher and an educator myself, Indian system of education, we mostly, not all, mostly, we go by the performance and the grades and the marks. Gone are those days, and especially after implementation of NEP, which speaks about child-friendly learning and assessment, where we give the children the privilege and the freedom to learn a concept by testing and through hands-on learning. Where, as already Mr. Achin has referred to, where if the school can reframe the pedagogy, in a way where we allow the children to make observations, come form hypotheses, make predictions through reasoning, of course, and that too they have to do under the supervision of a mentor. But the mentor will not get directly involved. She will be a shadow, helping and giving clues to the students. Then the children will perform experiments, analyze the results of the experiments, draw conclusion, and finally will give the result or the report. If we as educators, if we try to implement, accept, and do it uniformly through all, globally. I think, as Mr. Achin said, that we will have young minds who will think creatively on their own without repeating things taught in the class, which is the need of the hour. We need more young men and women with a mind of their own. Thank you.
Absolutely, ma'am. Thank you so much for that. Srinivasan, ma'am, will come to you with the same question once again. So, what is your opinion on this particular topic?
Yeah, I feel that schools should give freedom both to the students and to the teachers to transact the curriculum, to experiment, find new methods for transacting the curriculum. Because all experiments are a form of experience. That is what I believe in. And as Mr. Burrett had already referred to, it was long, long ago that Confucius has said, I hear, I forget, I see and I remember, I do and I understand. So doing something leads to better understanding. And that is where the whole concept of experiential learning comes into the picture, and which has been highly promoted now in the national education policy also. Now, this experiential learning actually is being practiced today in many schools. And what is it? It is actually a sensory kind of based learning. And it allows students maybe to explore, to watch, to assemble something, to disassemble something, to reassemble something. In other words, it develops an interest in learning. It is a kind of hands-on approach, and it helps in satisfying the curiosity quotient in the child. Why I say this is, I'm sure as teachers and even as parents, we must have faced at least 101 questions by young kids, especially when they are 3 and 4 years old, asking why this, why not this, why this, why this is that. And very often as parents and teachers, we try to curb their curiosity and their enthusiasm by asking them to be quiet. I believe that experiential learning is a big boon for us, and it is definitely going to help the child's curiosity to be satisfied. It will also develop, like other speakers have told before me, critical thinking, because they are going to be doing things and understanding and doing things. It will also lead to problem solving, which is again one of the most important things which is required in terms of 21st century skills, because many of our students do not know how to face challenges and how to face problems in real life. So if they do this, I'm sure with this kind of experimental and experiential learning, things will be definitely better. There are various ways in which these kind of experiments can be carried out in various subjects. Being a language teacher, I can speak for language for my own subject. If you are going to be teaching in the class, instead of the usual the old method with which we have all studied, perhaps the teacher coming and explaining and giving a lecture and going back, I think that's no longer is of any value, and it has no validity in today's context. So the best way perhaps to handle a chapter in prose or in drama is to have a role play. Make children assume various roles and then play it out, and I'm sure that will remain in their memories for long. Same goes for something in history. I can just give a small little example. When we talk of the first war of independence, 1857, and then we talk of the Jallianwala Bagh and all that, I think the best way, instead of a story form, of course, is the best, but other than that, a role play of this entire situation by making a few students play on the role of Indian soldiers and the British soldiers, and then the General Dyer, and then coming and acting it out, maybe giving them some toy guns and getting them to shoot it out and do it. That is something which will be in their memory forever. I think this is the kind of transaction which is experiential and which will stay forever in the minds of young children. So I think such things, even if it is a business studies class, perhaps simulating a kind of environment, maybe of the stock exchange, where you have a fluctuation in the stocks, and how is the reaction, or what is it that one can do about it, even in a higher class like grade 11 or 12, this kind of a simulation of certain scenes. All these are some of the ways in which experimental and experiential learning can take place. For younger children, it can be just a field trip anywhere, whether it's to the zoo or to a planetarium or somewhere where they are going to learn. In this context, I would also like to mention, when we talk of mathematics as a subject, very often there are children who really fear mathematics because it's more of a mind set. It's not that maths is a difficult subject, but they do have a mindset that maths is difficult and they fear it. So the best way, perhaps, to make children get over or get rid of this fear of mathematics is by a simple example. If you're talking about area and perimeter, or you're doing a chapter on areas of surfaces or whatever, you don't go to the theory at all. Take them to the school field, take them to the school stage, ask them to measure this thing and find out everything, then come back to the class and take the theory. I think that way, the fear of not knowing the formula or not being able to work out the exercise is going to go away from the minds of the children. So these are some of the ways in which it can be done. Maybe even some interactive games, vocabulary games, etc., which will help in developing the language skills. So these are some of the ways in which schools can promote this kind of a learning. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. That was yes, ma'am. Kasturi, ma'am.
Ragori, I just want to add one point over here. I was just thinking that how, subconsciously, or maybe the situation last 2 years when the pandemic started,
Yes,
right?
ma'am.
And
Yes.
when it was difficult we were having remote classes.
Absolutely,
Right?
yes.
Students were away from us, and to assess them, their learning, it was
Mhm.
becoming difficult for the teachers. So that
ma'am.
time, experimental learning came into use.
Absolutely.
We were giving projects, various kinds of hands-on projects to students, where it was that involvement of the teacher was less, and the thinking of the student and involvement of the students was more. And
Absolutely.
unknowingly, they did a lot of research on their own, and then they shared their outcome and their results with us, on which they were graded and the marks was being sent. But yes, as educators, there is a flip side to it, to convince parents
Yes.
and to make them understand that mode of assessment is always not a pen and paper test.
Yes.
There are other ways of testing a child's learning. To
Absolutely.
convince them was not easy for us, but yes, we could do it to some extent. Thank you.
That was
So
more of a self-learning, ma'am, I guess.
Self-learning.
I want to just add something like on the flip side only. Ma'am is in Hyderabad, I suppose, and she's talking of convincing parents. I live in a smaller place called Devas, where you can understand the kind of challenges which I face in convincing parents that, it's not always a pen and paper test that decides the future of your child. It was a really Herculean task for me. So I think we've all as educators gone through the same degrees of challenges. Maybe the degrees vary
Parents
from
are
one to
always
the other.
parents, ma'am.
Yes, that's true.
So I'll come to Kasturi, ma'am, with the last question. Many of the first world countries, they have been practicing experimental learning since a very, very long time, ma'am. So how do we match up to the global standards? With the NEP coming in, obviously that it has taken us the experimental learning to a new level. But how do we exactly match up to the global standards?
Actually, that I feel that experimental learning is a new normal. And I feel it's the most popular learning pedagogy, and which is in fad and globally accepted.
Absolutely.
Maybe we in India, maybe we are taking baby steps, but definitely not far behind. With a lot of hands-on learning, on-site learning, it is happening. It is happening. Yes, not everywhere, because we have so many schools in the remote area also.
Yes.
We need to create awareness for them as well. But yes, it is happening, like through classroom experiments, lab experiments, field trips. So we're speaking about field trips. Yes, now that with COVID, it is almost, it has reached to that endemic stage. So we are sending students to various fields, and they are gathering a lot of information and knowledge. And in the process, what is happening slowly but gradually, children are becoming more skilled. And what are the skills they are inculcating? What are those? They are independently planning, prioritizing their ideas. They are taking decisions. They are becoming, the cabinet members are becoming a part of the school in taking decisions for various events. And they are analyzing and evaluating certain situations, and analyzing, and they are coming to a decision which is not only cost effective but time effective also. There have been certain situations where we had taken help from the cabinet members. We have every school has a cabinet member, and the senior students are the cabinet members. We involve them in taking decisions related to schools, and they feel so happy about it. So don't you think this is an experimental learning for them? It is.
Yes,
It
ma'am.
is. So
Sure.
as it is rightly said, when we were young as students, we used to have that SUPW classes. And we used to call them some useful periods wasted, because we used to chat and bunk our classes. But I know how unknowingly we learned how to sew a cloth, or maybe to iron or to cook. As Sir was saying, that what's the best way of learning? To read how to cook a food, to read some journal, or to go to the kitchen and to start cooking. Life is like that. You have to plunge into it to learn and to come out successful and independent. Yes, we as Indian schools, maybe we have taken the decision a little late, but better late than never.
Absolutely,
Have
ma'am.
taken, yes, we have taken baby steps, and we are doing it, and we have adopted it, and we are doing fine. Thank you.
Ma'am. Srinivasan, ma'am, I would like to have the same question for you as well. Like, how do we match up to the global standards? What do you do at your school to match up to the global
Yeah,
standards?
actually, you see, the concept as such of experimental learning is not something, it's, we have now got into it, like we've just plunged into it, but it's not really a new concept. If you go by, our Gurukul system and all that, where you had
Yes.
this kind of inquiry, and then, the kind of experimentation and everything. But unfortunately, over the centuries, everything was, gone, it went backwards, I would say. And now with the NAP coming into the picture and focusing on it, I think we have made, we've started on it. But I also believe that there are many schools who have been doing it, not because of the NAP, which is coming into the picture now. There have been many schools which are already following this kind of a thing, but maybe they are not going by that nomenclature of experiential learning. So that will now change, and I'm sure more and more schools will definitely get into the picture now. And as I can say that I'm very confident that in a couple of years, we may even exceed the global standards in terms of experiential or experimental learning. And other countries, hopefully, would look up to us as the prime examples of this kind of learning. So I don't think anything is impossible. Nothing is impossible according to me. I'm always optimistic, and I do believe that this is going to happen very soon. Thank you.
Ma'am, I just want to add one line over here. As ma'am has rightly pointed out, the Gurukul system, where they used to cook their own food, wash their own clothes, and in fact, in various parts, we still have that format. But yes, ma'am, as per NEP, now we educators have the freedom of talking to parents that we are going to implement this procedure. And you have to accept that, one. And number two is, a child, it is not necessary for a child to always take a pen and paper test. They can have hands-on learning assessment, which can be documented, and the evidence can be sent to the board for appreciation.
Yes.
That help now we have, that appreciation now we have. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Kasturi ma'am and Srinivasan ma'am. It was truly wonderful to hear from both of you. I would like to have Achin for the vote of thanks now.
Really a wonderful session, very seamless. The best part of it, so free flowing. But sir, thank you so much for giving us a great start, as always, for setting the tone. And I think some wonderful experiences you shared, especially about field trips and other aspects, really, really insightful. Thank you so much. Dr. Srinivasan, ma'am, thank you so much. I think some wonderful points you made, no doubt about it. Starting from the fact that your belief that any subject under the sun, we can make it more activity-based, we can make it more interesting, and how hands-on approach is so important. And the fact that satisfying curiosity of students, yes, as parents, and of course, so many esteemed educators in the forum, we'd all agree that indeed that's one of the prime objectives. Also, I really like the way you articulated on how to actually practically implement it, be it in terms of role play of historical events, or be it in terms of your wonderful example that you gave with regard to making subjects like mathematics more interesting, which at times for many students there's a phobia, etc. So I think really wonderful words of wisdom coming from decades of experience. Thank you so much, ma'am. Really wonderful.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your kind words.
Thank you. Our pleasure, ma'am, to have you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Dr. Chatterjee, Kasturi ma'am, thank you so much. Really thankful to you for your insights. I think a few very good observations you made, especially considering the fact that yes, we are looking at a more generic, more holistic overall development, but each subject needs to be dealt with separately. I agree with you on that completely. And also the role of mentor. I think Kasturi ma'am really very wonderfully dealt on that particular aspect. That mentor needs to be someone who will handhold, who will be beside the student, but at the same time will allow the student to be on his or her own, like to develop that independence, etc. So I think very beautifully articulated. And also the last aspect, that during pandemic, which of course was a huge challenge, and where we saw the strong will and determination of Indian educators who ensured the students didn't lose the precious academic year, how hands-on projects actually helped in terms of, and how experiential learning was actually put to use. So I think some wonderful discussions we had in this forum today. Really, I'm sure our esteemed members of our esteemed audience also gained from it. And I can also tell this confidently from my experience of visiting so many schools and interacting with so many esteemed educators, that this particular concept of experiential learning, I agree with Dr. Srinivasan, that very soon Indian educators will set global standards, which others will follow. Having known so many of them personally, I can vouch for this. So I think really wonderful session. I thank all of you again. Thank you. Take care and goodbye.
Goodbye.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Goodbye, ma'am.
Good night.
Thank you.